we're going to have a debate here about the unemployed workforce as a vehicle for revolutionary activism and the importance of building the class consciousness of the unemployed. What we're going to have is open. We're going to, some speakers are going to speak between 5 and 10 minutes. We're going to start off with Michael Craig of the Unemployed Union, followed by Eamon McCann and then Tommy McKenna. And then we'll take 20 minutes or so from the floor, and then we'll bring it to a close. Alright? Maybe we'll open up to you, Michael, then.
Well, can you hear me all right? Hate these things. Well, as it gathered, I'm the organiser for the Unemployed Union, which we're only sort of getting off the ground. And as soon as somebody would say, well, Unemployed Union, you would imagine, we're sort of the Citizens Advice Bureau. Well, we're not that, you know. We can represent, and have done, represented people at appeals and reviews and Social Security Agency. But, you know, there is the CAB and there are people who can do that, and they're very good at it. And while the government continues to give them funds, you know, let them tear away with it. But other things that we do recently, you know, lobbying ministers and the government, we had some success in this one. I'm sure you've all heard of cold weather payments. They're paid to certain categories of claimants, usually, you know, people in the long-term sick. And if the temperature in your postcode area falls below 0 for 7 consecutive days, you can take the £25 towards your heating bills. But whenever we looked at it, we discovered that they were measured in a very strange way. Instead of actually recording the temperature from each of the weather stations, which represented several postcode areas, they were actually doing it on a forecast, and the forecast was usually wrong. So we followed it for a while, and we noticed that in November, in that big cold spell there, that people in certain postcode areas should have been paid for 2 weeks, and nobody had got paid. So I took it up with Alex Atwood, showed that, you know, government policy shouldn't be based on weather forecasts, and he for the first time in history, paid retrospectively £1.2 million. That it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't taken it up with him. There about 3 weeks ago, he paid out about a quarter of that to 3 postcodes for a week where the forecast had said it was 5 days below 0, it was actually 7. Got him to check the record. So he not only that, but because of the debate with him, he then went to David Cameron and demanded that people who were entitled to cold weather payment should get a lump sum of £350. And Cameron's still working on that one, but I wouldn't hold my breath. But we do things like that. But that's not really what we're about, you know. We're first of all, the unemployed aren't going to be represented by the trade unions because they have their hands tied. They have enough to do representing people who are in work. They have enough to do trying to get people who aren't in unions recruited into unions. So, you know, the unemployed have to really get out of the house and be the leaders in all the protests, because they're the ones that are going to be most affected by the austerity measures. And I mean, and even people who are experts in benefits have only just come to understand how bad it's going to be. Ian Duncan Smith produced a white paper called, you know, Welfare in the 21st Century there in October, and it was an absolutely massive document, very complex. And I mean, it's subtitled "Simplifying Benefits." What a joke! But when you look at it, the basis of it is about compulsion for the long-term unemployed. Now, these are people who actually, most of them receive income support. Now, I'm one myself. I've been on income support for the last 4 years, so I know exactly what it's like to live on it. You know, and you know, who better to represent the unemployed than somebody who's, you know, unemployed themselves and knows how hard it is to live on it. But income support only accounts for 9% of the welfare bill, so why attack them? It's pure ideology. I mean, we would argue there was no need for any cuts at all. Here's one of the things that backs that up as far as welfare goes. That welfare reform bill, it took 6 or 7 years to design it. Now, there was no credit crunch 6 or 7 years ago. You know, there was no fault in the economy whatsoever, or no sign of it being any. Well, except some of us realised it was going to be. But then we look at it a different way. So they have deliberately decided that they're going to move back the clock. That people, this whole thing, everybody must be forced out to do some kind of work, and they're doing it in such a way that we'll be actually back to the 30s. In 1932, the way benefits worked was that you got your benefit for a couple of months. After that, you didn't get any. You had to go and do relief work to get it. Some people might know the history of this better than me, but I know my grandfather was one of the relief workers in Belfast, and they had to dig up the streets with pick and shovel, and the money they got was about a third of what they actually needed to feed their families. So they decided that they were going to strike, but the unions had enough problems of their own. They didn't organise the unemployed relief workers. It was actually the Communist Party, and they formed a revolutionary workers group which organised them, and people from the Falls and people from the Shankill got together and went on strike. They sent the police in to beat them up on horseback and everything, and these people from both sides of the community dug up the pavement off the street and fired it at the cops and actually won the battle. And at the end of the day, they got all their demands, but they didn't consolidate them. They didn't form an unemployed union. And within a few months, they were all back in their own tribal trenches. And they were, you know, okay, they had won their demands, but they hadn't really changed that much. Now, we are coming to that situation again. And, I mean, there's all this stuff that's going on in North Africa, Egypt, Yemen, you know, you've seen it all on the television. And of course, the mainstream reporters are all saying, oh, well, they're dictatorships. It's democracy they're looking for. Well, I mean, that media wouldn't know democracy if it slapped them in the face, you know. We don't have democracy here for all sorts of reasons. I mean, who here voted for the Tories? Not one person in this room. Another example of how we don't have democracy is that half of the people, almost half of the people, don't vote because there's nobody that they would vote for. So if you take that figure of half that don't vote, and look at what the Tories got in the election, they actually get 21% of the vote of people who are, so, you know, where's the democracy in that there? But the Tories are only doing this because they only care about a little elite at the top of society, and the rest of us are expendable. So we need to organise to show them that we are not expendable. And we need to get out in the street, and we need to show that we, not only do we not want these austerity measures, we don't want all this persecution of the unemployed and the sick, but we want a change in the system. We want proper democracy from the ground up, and that's what this union's about. So I hope all of you who are unemployed are going to join it, and we'll be out in the streets soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael. Can I hand over now to Im McCann of People for Profit Alliance?
Right. What I say in relation to the unemployed is this, that there's no getting around the fact that it's difficult for the unemployed to organise themselves. It's difficult for trade unions to organise the unemployed. That's not to say that every effort shouldn't be made to do it. But one of the key differences between people who are unemployed and people who are in work is that people who are in work come together at a certain, well, during working hours. They're either working in a static place in a factory or an office or something, or they're coming back to there even with their workers, like postal workers and so on, coming back to there. And they're all more or less in the same situation. You know, so of course there's well-paid people and lower-paid people and managers and workers, but generally speaking, you get a large number of people who are on the same wages, and so they've got a common interest in uniting together to advance that. So that's the whole basis of the trade union movement historically. and that's where it came from, with the development of capitalism and the urban working class, and so forth. Unemployed people are scattered. They're even more scattered now than they used to be. Because when I was growing up, I can remember times when you would get hordes of people signing on together at the same time, for limited periods during the week, and everybody came in big queues. Now a lot of things are conducted. People are off the unemployed register because they're in all sorts of schemes and disguised unemployment, and the signing on is scattered during the week. It's very, very difficult to get people together. It's also difficult for unemployed people to do anything, because at the end of the day, sort of implicit in every bit of trade union activity, we employed workers at the back of people's minds is, when it comes to the crunch, if the worst comes to the worst, we can strike. And that's the ultimate weapon of a trade union movement and of organised workers. You say, we're not working anymore, we're striking. Difficult as it is these days, they have a legal strike. But unemployed people can't strike. What would it mean? Mean that you refuse to attend and sign on? Obviously not, it can't be done. So there's all those weaknesses involved, sort of in organising the unemployed. And it seems to me that that puts an even greater duty on the trade union movement to do something about it. I mean, it's not patronising to say that about the unemployed. They're just not in that organisable way. Somebody, a revolutionary Marxist, once said the main thing that the unemployed can do is riot. You know, sort of, you can do that there, but riot isn't all that sort of work. You can't put forward demands, or it's difficult anyway. You don't say, well, riot if you don't increase the benefits and so forth. So that puts a huge duty on the trade union movement to keep in touch with the unemployed and to link them in to the organisation of employed workers. And that's therein lies the importance, it seems to me, of the discussion which has been had earlier. But somebody asked the question, could an unemployed workers' union join the Trades Council? Now, in theory, no. You know, you have to be affiliated to Congress, and that's the way Congress likes it and so forth. In theory, no. In practice, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm on the Northern Ireland Committee, sort of I'm supposed to speak sort of the official line, but as far as I'm concerned personally, I would have the unemployed workers in. I would encourage unemployed workers to join it. And I would say if anybody wants to stop us, let them try. Actually, nobody will. You know, there's loads of rules sort of which are just not enforced because it doesn't make common sense. I don't believe there'd be any great hassle over that. That would happen. So I think the Trades Council should do it, and not only this Trades Council, but I don't think there's an unemployed workers' union branch or operation in Derry. Is it, Michael? There, not as yet, so it hasn't come up before Derry Trades Council. What is more, we've got a sort of a bad practice in the trade union movement of letting people go when they become unemployed. Sort of if people are in trade unions in factories or offices or whatever it is, then they become unemployed quite frequently. So they can't afford the union sub anymore because their sort of income has suddenly plummeted. Now, some trade unions do make provision for that, so you can write it down. An awful lot of trade unions pay not the slightest attention to workers once they're not going to get the full sub out of them. Now, that has to be fought within the trade union movement as well. I think that people who are in a union and they work, if you have amassed, say, whatever, 2 years sort of membership of the trade union, if you become unemployed, you're not leaving the trade union movement because you don't like it, or you become, you know, you're hostile to it. It's no fault of your own until such times as you get another job. How often all that takes. I believe that people should be allowed to stay active in their unions and to be excused paying subscriptions, instead of not to keep people involved. There's other things that to me, they mentioned some of the other things that came up sort of previously, and one was sort of about unemployed people becoming active sort of in the union. Somebody started to get who it was, saying, well, he was retired now. Retired members are very important in trade unions. Sort of, retired members, for a start, can have a wee bit more time than people who aren't are retired. Sort of, in many unions, we were included, if it wasn't for the retired members who have stayed active and have been welcomed and urged to stay active, in many cases the co-branch structure would collapse. Belfast being one of them. I think all the officers of our Belfast and district branch of the NUJ, I think every single one of them is a retired member. So at least they're retired and doing a bit of freelance work, or they're retired totally. So all that should be done, and I think it's urgent to do all that because, as I mentioned before, there's cuts coming down the road, sort of, which we don't know what's hit. As Kenneth Clark, who is himself a former Chancellor and a Tory, now the Justice Minister Maria, sort of across in London, said a few days ago, he says people are not going to know what hit them come April. He says they've got no conception of it. It hasn't been factored in to their thinking. Sort of when there's cuts across the board in benefits,